when your eyes close, your brain still sees. But what does it see? Not the phone screen, not the noisy news, but the deepest images imprinted in your life. The faces of your loved ones, the worries that have no name yet, the memories that seem to have fallen asleep. At 45, 60, or 80, each night is not just sleep, but a quiet meeting between the brain and an entire lifetime of experiences. This video will gently walk with you to explore what the brain does with memories, emotions, wounds, and gratitude when your eyes are closed, and how we can choose kinder, more beautiful images to lull ourselves into peace. If you recognize yourself in these moments, please subscribe to Smart Sleep so we can gently care for your nights together. When your eyes close, it may seem as if the outside world has fallen into darkness, but inside your head, another screen quietly lights up. It is not the harsh glare of the TV, not the cold blue light of your phone, but the very personal light of memory of the fragments of life you have lived, of faces, streets, kitchens, rooftops, quiet afternoons, and hurried mornings at 45, 60, 75, or 90. Your brain does not shut down like a device switched off. On the contrary, when your eyelids close, that is when a new, silent shift begins. The visual cortex, the part of your brain you have used your whole life to see the world, now switches from recording mode to editing mode, an entire long day that has just passed. With news, glances, license plates, numbers, emails, bills, supermarket shelves, loved ones' faces, unfinished conversations, worries about health, a grandchild's laughter, the doctor's gaze, all of it is brought onto the review table. Patiently and tirelessly, the brain rearranges, compresses, links these things to older stories in your life, and quietly deletes what is unnecessary. What is fascinating is this. This process does not need light, does not need open eyes, and does not need you to try to remember. It happens naturally, just as your heart keeps beating without being reminded. Your lungs keep breathing without asking permission, only with memory. The brain does even more. It chooses on your behalf. It nominates which images are worthy of being kept to become part of who you will be tomorrow. If you pay attention, you'll notice there are small things that keep coming back very clearly whenever you lie down. The worried eyes of a loved one you haven't asked about yet, a harsh remark from someone that stung, a negative news story repeated again and again, or a warm moment when someone brought you a cup of tea or gently pulled a blanket over you. These details do not resurface by accident. The visual cortex and the regions related to emotion and memory are working together. They re-watch the footage of the day, cross-check it with the years that came before, and silently ask, does this matter to me? Does it relate to what I value? Does it threaten me? Is this something I want to learn from? And it is precisely these silent questions, repeated through the night, night after night, that gradually shape a person. What we believe is important, who we think is worth worrying about, what we consider a point of pride, what we feel can never be forgiven. 20, you may not notice, but at 50, 65, 80, after you've lived through enough, you begin to sense clearly. Some memories stay, some grow dim, yet few people tell you that behind this is a very scientific mechanism. The brain cannot store everything, so it must always choose, and that choosing is deeply influenced by what you let it see the most, especially right before sleep. Lying in bed, many people pick up their phones and scroll through sensational headlines, conflicts, worries about politics, money, illness. Biologically, that is as if you are handing your brain a list of outstanding candidates to put into storage. Threats, unease, chaos. Then, when you close your eyes, the brain keeps doing its serious job. It replays those images and files them under important, because it assumes, if my owner looks at these so much, they must be vital for survival. What is the result? The night grows heavier, sleep more restless, and the next morning, the world inside your head feels just a bit darker, not purely because of age, but because of the message you unconsciously sent your brain. Please keep the worry. But there is another possibility, gentler and more intentional. Think of an evening when you end the day with very ordinary but kind things. A short call to a loved one to ask, "How are you feeling today?" A hug. A thank you said out loud. A quiet sentence to yourself, "I did reasonably well today." Or simply looking a little longer at the face of the person who has been beside you all these years. Then, before you close your eyes, the last images your visual cortex captures are not stock prices, not breaking news banners, but warm presence. As you drift into sleep, your brain still begins its editing session, but this time, the material in its hands is different. It holds the face of someone you love, a smile, a peaceful moment, a sense of gratitude, and it asks, "Of everything that happened today, isn't this what deserves to be kept? So that tomorrow I can remind my owner that this life is still worth cherishing." This is not vague optimism, it is biology. Memories tied to positive emotion, repeated gently and placed at the end of the day, have a better chance of being consolidated. Your brain does not inherently favor bad news or good news. It is simply loyal to one signal. Whatever is watched often, thought about often, felt intensely, especially right before sleep, will be marked as important. And so, every night, you are in fact writing a tiny fragment of who you will be tomorrow, just by choosing what you let your brain see before it starts its night shift. Between the ages of 45 and 90, you likely know very well that you cannot control everything. You cannot decide whether illness comes or not, whether loved ones leave or not, whether the world is noisy or quiet. But among the countless things beyond your control, one intimate border remains. Those few brief minutes before your eyes close, in which you can choose whether to keep feeding yourself images that make your brain brace for danger, or to offer it a gentle full stop, a small whisper that says, "Today is enough." When you understand that your visual cortex is still working, and that the things you look at, even just scrolling for fun, are becoming raw materials for your brain to decide who you are, you begin to approach your evenings differently. No longer carelessly letting your mind drift along endless videos, but making a conscious choice. Tonight, what do I want to stay with me? It might be an afternoon long ago when your child ran across the grass. Shoes sandy, clothes dirty, laughing with a mouthful of baby teeth. It might be the face of someone who has passed on, who reminds you to live more kindly. It might be a small moment from today. You made yourself a cup of hot tea and sat still for 5 quiet minutes. These images do not need to be grand. What your brain needs is honesty and repetition. If each night, before sleep, you allow yourself to pause and gently choose one kind image to screen one last time, your brain will begin to understand. This is what matters. This is what should be kept. This is the direction this life wants to go. For that reason, instead of scolding yourself, why am I older and always anxious, always stuck on the bad things? Perhaps you can start with a different, gentler question. All these years, what have I unconsciously been showing my brain? How many times have I gone to bed with my mind full of bad news, arguments, resentment, self-blame? How many nights have I not given myself one last, kinder picture? Not to blame yourself, but to recognize that from tonight, just one very small change is already a quiet gift for the rest of your life. Sleep and memory science shows us the brain is not just a box that fills up. It is a librarian arranging the entire library of your life. When your eyes close, that librarian walks along the shelves, arms full of new files, deciding which ones will enter the long-term collection. You cannot stand beside them, guiding every page, but you can decide the quality of the material they must work with. And that is a great power for anyone, especially those who have already traveled a long road and gathered a lifetime of memories. In the end, the question is not only, how much can my brain still remember? But, among what remains, how much is what I truly want to carry with me? Tonight, when you turn off the light, place your phone a little farther away, give yourself a few slow breaths, and choose to revisit one scene your heart finds peaceful, the eyes of someone you love, a kind gesture, one small thing you did well today. However modest, that is the moment you are sending your brain a clear message. Please keep these for me. And if you patiently repeat this, night after night, those small choices will gradually weave into a calmer version of yourself. No slogans, no noise, just a deep respect for the brain that has served you all these years. Give it better material to work with, because if when your eyes close, your brain still sees, then perhaps it is time to gently ask yourself, what do you want it to see about your life each night? Before stepping into sleep, once we understand that even with closed eyes, the brain continues to filter and arrange, another natural question arises. In that darkness, which images are being prioritized and developed? And more importantly, what kind of material are we unconsciously handing to the brain to build its portrait of our life? Try to picture this. Very slowly, very quietly, you turn off the light, place your phone out of reach, leaving only a trace of light seeping through the curtain. At 50, 65, or 80, perhaps you no longer need the jolts of notifications, no longer need blue light flashing at midnight after decades of service. Your body deserves an evening that can settle. As the light decreases, your body begins to release more melatonin, the gentle signal of darkness, telling every cell it is time to shift from tension into recovery. At the same time, your visual cortex, which has spent the whole day receiving a constant stream of images, is finally freed from new input. And in that overlap between lights, going out and sleep, not yet arrived, an invisible room opens, the dark room of memory. In the past, before digital cameras, people had to bring film into a dark room to be developed. No strong light allowed, no rushing. A single wrong flash could ruin the whole roll. The process demanded patience, order, and respect for each frame captured out there in the world. Your brain, in its own biological way, is doing something strikingly similar, though you may never have thought about it that way. All day, it shoots countless moments. The cashiers smile as they hand back your change. The familiar road to the hospital. your hand tightening slightly on the railing because of a bit of dizziness, your grandchild's laughter from the next room, the feeling of waiting for test results, the last light of day over the supermarket parking lot, low clouds over your roof. In daylight, you cannot stop to feel every detail, but at night, in the safe enough darkness, your brain starts to develop those frames. Scientifically, this is when neural networks in the hippocampus and cortex replay the activity patterns of the day. Studies show that during sleep, especially deep sleep, and also in the quiet minutes after we first close our eyes, the brain replays sequences similar to when we actually lived them, as if it were watching a slow-motion film, pausing at key frames, adjusting contrast, cutting away excess, and deciding which frames will move from short-term memory into long-term storage. That is how the brain learns, understands, and builds your inner narrative about your life. But just like a darkroom, the quality of the final image depends greatly on the roll of film you bring in. If your day's film is packed with tension, harsh words, inflammatory news, endless scrolling, self-reproach, I should have, I ought to have, moments standing before the mirror seeing only flaws, then by evening, the brain's darkroom has only that to work with. It enlarges those scenes, reviews them, links them to old worries, labels them important. Remember this. The next morning, you wake up with a vague sense that life is heavier, the future narrower, your heart more easily tired. Not because you are weak, but because your brain has done its job. It has clearly developed what you unconsciously handed to it. Conversely, if in your day's film, amidst the inevitable worries, there are still honest, gentle moments. A thank you spoken out loud instead of kept inside. A moment of extra patience with a loved one. A brief call just to check in. 5 minutes sitting still looking at the light outside the window. A choice to go to bed 10 minutes earlier so your body is less pushed. Then tonight's darkroom receives very different material. The brain notices, there are tender frames here. It chooses some of them, connects them to older good memories, a hand once held, a home once full of laughter, a time you overcame hardship. From there, it weaves a hidden thread that helps you retain the sense that life is not only erosion, but also the accumulation of proof that you have loved, endured, and grown. Many people in middle and older age often say, I only remember the sad, bad things. My mind must be failing. The truth is subtler. An older brain is often more sensitive to signs of risk because it has lived through loss, illness, change. It wants to protect you, but if every night before sleep we keep feeding it noisy images, televised arguments, painful stories, unanswered messages, and harsh comparisons with others, it will misunderstand that these are what truly need priority. The darkroom will then keep developing frames that do not help you rest. That is why the few minutes before sleep are so precious. It is not just empty time, it is the moment you can choose which roll of film goes into the darkroom. You don't need elaborate rituals. Simply dim the screens, let the darkness soften, and gently invite yourself to recall 3 pleasant things from the day. A kind look, a simple but sufficient meal, a time the doctor said, the results are good, a step that is still steady on the floor. By letting these images appear last, you place them on the priority tray. As you drift into sleep, your brain's cleansing systems become more active, washing away metabolic waste and clearing the way for neurons to recover. At the same time, memory networks are refined, weak, unnecessary connections are trimmed. Connections that create coherence and safety are preserved. At 70 or 80, your brain still has the capacity to change, adjust, and learn new ways of seeing, not through dramatic overnight transformations, but through many small, quiet repetitions across hundreds of nights. Imagine two people listening to you now. One leaves the TV on until their eyes droop, with arguments, bad news, and fear running until the last second. The other, also tired and worried, but before sleep, turns off the screen, drinks a sip of warm water, tells themselves, "What I've managed today is enough," then recalls a grandchild's smile, or the morning sky, or simply the feeling of still being here. Both close their eyes in the dark, but their inner dark rooms are not the same. One develops fear, the other develops a little gratitude. This difference is not about 1 or 2 nights. It is the story of 30 nights, 300 nights, 1,000 nights. The story of which film we absent-mindedly place in the tray each evening. And the good news is, at any age, even with fully silver hair, you can change that choice starting tonight. If you are lying somewhere quiet in America listening to these words, perhaps in a small apartment in Boston, a wooden house near pine trees in Minnesota, or a modest home in suburban Texas, let the place where you are become a gentle dark room. No flashing lights, no noise pounding in, just your breath, your heartbeat, and a few images you consciously keep. Softly ask yourself, of everything that happened, what deserves to be developed clearly, so that tomorrow I remember my life is not only made of stumbles. It might be a call you made in spite of your hesitation, keeping a health appointment, cooking yourself a simple but complete meal instead of skipping, forgiving something small so your heart could be lighter. Let those images step into the dark. Let your brain develop them, enlarge them, link them with brighter scenes from the past, so that tomorrow morning, among the many hazy impressions, there is still a quiet current running through. I am still choosing to live more kindly with myself. And perhaps the deepest lesson of this dark room is this: we cannot change what has been shot, but we can choose which frames to hang. Sad stories, losses, wounds do not vanish because we look away, but if every night we force the brain to develop them over and over, we ourselves place them at the center. If instead, each night, we leave a little space for evidence that we have grown, been brave, been loving, then slowly, that center shifts. When darkness fills the room and your eyes are fully closed, allow yourself to be a bit gentler with yourself. Do not force forgetting. Do not force cheerfulness. Just choose one more kind frame to hand to your brain tonight. That is not only a secret to softer sleep, but a way to quietly rewrite the voice that narrates your life. Less reproach, more appreciation. And once we understand that each night a secret darkroom is at work, perhaps we will gently ask, tonight, what kind of material will I give it that is worthy of the person I want to become in the years ahead? When we understand that the brain quietly reselects the most important faces each night, another natural question taps at the door. Beyond remembering, does the brain only stay fixed on the past, or does it also quietly experiment with possibilities for the future? And if it does, can we whisper to it a gentler assignment? When you lie down, eyes closed, breathing slowed, daytime thoughts drifting away from the noise, a very subtle region of the brain begins to work differently. Instead of merely replaying what has happened, It turns fragments of memories, emotions, faces, worries, and hopes into new scenarios. Stories not entirely real, but deeply real to your heart as they unfold. We call this dreaming, drifting, those in-between states of half-sleep. Scientifically, this is not meaningless play. It is a form of simulation. The brain tries out safer versions of the future, where you might lose, might meet again, might fail, might be forgiven, might be brave in ways you haven't managed in the daytime. Many researchers believe dreams are where the brain test runs emotions, checks reactions, and practices how to face threats or hopes without paying the full price. There, you might walk into the hospital room once more, meet someone who has gone, find yourself missing a train, or unexpectedly resolving something that once haunted you. No superstition is needed, only an emotional laboratory running in the dark. Picture a very quiet night for you. The small house in the suburbs is still. The heater hums softly. The wall clock ticks. Your eyes are closed, but your inner world is still on. The things you thought about most in the day, the unfinished matters in your heart, slip into the borderland between waking and sleep. Based on those pieces, the brain composes scenarios. What if I lose this? What if I speak to that person again? What if my illness worsens? What if I miss an opportunity? What if I apologize? What if I dare to refuse? What if I return to that place once more? Each version appears on that invisible screen not to frighten you, but to test. How would I feel? Can I bear it? Is there another way? When you dream of being lost, it may be your brain testing your capacity to handle disorientation. When you dream of meeting someone who has passed, it may be your brain giving itself a chance to touch grief in a safer frame, where you can cry unseen, or say what you never managed to say. When you dream of danger cliffs, being chased, it may be drills for your alarm system. Is it too sensitive? Are you storing too much fear? When you dream of a gentler future, healthier, calmer, that may be your brain, offering a demo of hope. If life eased a little, how would that feel? At 45, 60, 80, these simulations can grow stronger, because your store of life, emotion, and worry is larger. You know, now, what illness is, separation is, raising children, keeping a home, losing a job, retiring, saying goodbye, reading test results. Your brain has a rich archive with which to build scenarios. That is why dreams can feel heavy. Many older adults say, "I dream bad things. It must be a bad omen." But seen through a gentler scientific lens, we may understand. Perhaps your brain is doing something deeply humane, giving you a place to process what you haven't yet digested. Here we reach a crucial point. If dreams and twilight states are an emotional laboratory, where do the lab materials come from? From what you leave in your mind before sleep. If you end your day in arguments, dark news, comparisons, self-blame, rehearsing only the worst-case scenarios, your brain will use those scraps to simulate. The future versions in your dreams will then tilt darker, more tense, not because fate wants to scare you, but because all day long you have unintentionally given your brain an assignment. Check what happens if things get worse, and like a loyal researcher, it runs exactly that experiment. Conversely, if in the last minutes of the day, you speak to your brain with different signals. Today, I lived as fully as I could within my strength. I know there are things unresolved, but tonight, I allow myself to rest. There are people I love and who love me. Tomorrow may be hard, but I am not alone. Then the assignment you slip into the lab is different. The simulations of the night have a chance to carry another tone. It does not mean you will only dream of lovely things. But even within troubled dreams, there may appear more scenes where you find a way through, receive support, soften. The brain will not only ask, "What if I lose everything?" but will also have permission to test. What if I take better care of myself? What if I ask for help? What if I forgive? Stop attacking myself. Choose a lighter way to live. What might happen then? Here, we are not talking about fully controlling your dreams. No one can do that, and you don't need to. But we can gently adjust the assignment. The way you speak to yourself before sleep is a set of instructions. A few kind sentences, a few warm images, a few slow breaths can act like small lines placed on the lab table. Please prioritize scenarios in which I still have hope, still have connection, still trust in my own worth. The brain reads this language, not in words, but through the whole body. The heartbeat slowing down, muscles loosening, the alert regions of the brain settling. In that state, the emotional simulations of the night are less dictated by panic and have more chance to become a process of restoration. Try imagining two different endings to the same day. In the first version, you go to bed with your mind full of questions. What if the test results are bad? What if the money isn't enough? What if my children and grandchildren don't care about me? Then you keep scrolling, seeking out more news that convinces you the future is nothing but danger. In the second version, you still know those worries are there. You do not deny them, but before sleep, you whisper to yourself, "I have done what I can today. The rest I leave for tomorrow. Right now, my body needs rest. There are people I love, things I have overcome. I believe I am more than my fears." These two versions send two different assignments into the night laboratory. One assignment: prove that everything is frightening. The other: show me that I can still stand. The brain will work on that foundation. Research on dreams shows that often, in dreams, we face our fears in distorted forms. Being late for an exam, getting lost, losing things, being chased. But there are also many dreams in which we try on new roles, stronger, more capable, defended, allowed to express our feelings. These rehearsal dreams, if they occur within a safe physiological environment, enough deep sleep, a cared-for body, can help soften the sharpness of anxiety when we wake, as if the emotions have been tested, partially discharged in the simulated world. That is one of the ways the brain protects you. So, what is the practical lesson for the years after 45? Perhaps it is not to try to control each dream, but to learn to respect that laboratory. Do not throw only garbage into it. Pointless online arguments, exaggerated dark imaginings, rounds of self-punishment before sleep. Give it better material, a bit of honest gratitude, a bit of acknowledgement for your own effort. A small message: I allow myself to imagine a future version of me who is calmer, kinder to myself, even if life is not perfect. You may be thinking, I'm old now, everything is already said. What's the use of dreaming? But precisely at this age, the emotional laboratory is all the more precious, not to paint distant illusions, but to train the mind in some gentler scenarios for the remaining years. Imagine if each night, before sleep, instead of stopping at what if everything gets worse, you add one very small line. What if tomorrow brings one small, pleasant thing for me? If I am less harsh with myself, what in me might feel lighter? You don't need to believe it 100%. You only need to allow your brain to register those questions as possibilities to be considered. That alone is a different assignment. And when the simulations of the night are fed with those assignments, slowly, you may notice a very quiet shift. You are less panicked by worst-case scenarios, because in your dreams you have rehearsed many times and still seen yourself survive. You can more easily imagine softer ways of responding instead of only collapse. You see the rest of your life as space that can be reorganized, simplified, refined, rather than only a downward slope. It all begins with a few silent minutes before sleep, where you talk to yourself kindly and send into the night a message. Please, if possible, help me see that I still have choices. Tonight, before you let yourself drift fully into sleep, you might ask yourself a very gentle question. If dreams are a safe laboratory, what do I want to train in? Which fear needs to be seen more clearly so it can cut less deep? Which hope needs to be touched lightly so it does not go out completely? You do not need to answer out loud. Just let that question rest in your chest, along with a few deep breaths. The rest, let your brain, the loyal old friend that has accompanied you from childhood until now, quietly do its work. And perhaps the most thought-provoking thing, once we understand that when the eyes are closed, the brain tests many versions of the future, is this: the inner future is not determined only by circumstances, but also by the kinds of questions we gently hand to the brain each night. If every night we force it to prove that everything only gets worse, it will find ways to legitimize that belief for you. But if, from a very small starting point, we dare give it another assignment, let's see whether, in the years ahead, I can live more slowly, be kinder to this body, less severe with this heart, more open with those I trust. Then perhaps each sleep will become a quiet rehearsal for that version. And tomorrow morning, when you open your eyes, instead of carrying only the shadow of dark scenarios, you may carry a very subtle feeling that deep inside, you are quietly learning to treat your own life better. When we understand that each dream is a safe laboratory where the brain silently test runs future versions, another truth gently appears. To protect us, the brain does not only dream, it also stands guard. But in the dark, is it guarding at the right level or overdoing it? Try to feel your body at the end of a long day, at 50, 65, or 80. Tiredness is not just sore muscles, it is joints sending signals, memory occasionally skipping, a letter from the hospital, a bill higher than expected, a missed call from your child you haven't had time to return, a line of news about accidents, disease, instability. You go to bed thinking, I'm exhausted, surely ill, fall asleep right away. Yet, strangely, the more you close your eyes, the more awake your mind becomes. Worst-case scenarios appear more clearly. Your heart refuses to slow. Your breath becomes shallow. The smallest noise in the hallway makes you startle. Many people blame themselves. I'm weak, overthinking. But the truth is much gentler. That is the oldest protection system in your brain doing its job. Only it has been fed too many alarm signals. In our brains are regions dedicated to scanning for threat, like night watchmen who never fully sleep. Deep inside, structures like the amygdala take on the task of detecting danger signals. Angry faces, strange noises, painful memories. a doctor's words, the sight of an ambulance, words like cancer, accident, crisis. This is what helped our ancestors avoid wild animals, fire, enemies. Today, it helps us notice unusual symptoms. Remember, medication, not cross on a red light. Thanks to it, we are safer, but because it is so loyal, if each day it is bombarded with too many threatening images and words, it will default to believing the outer world is constantly on red alert. And when night comes, instead of letting you sleep, it keeps scanning the sky, like a soldier afraid to take their finger off the trigger. In older adults, this happens even more easily, because with age, you have truly lived through things that are more than just headlines. Surgeries, falls, a spouse's illness, a loved one's passing, savings that seemed enough and then felt fragile. The brain is not inventing danger. It has recorded it from real life. At the same time, changes in your body, slower memory, health that needs monitoring all become data for the alert system to ask, are we safe? Wanting to protect you, it chooses the worst but easiest method, keeping you awake a bit longer just to be sure. Now, look back at a very familiar evening. You sit in front of the TV, the ticker at the bottom runs non-stop. Accidents, conflicts, division, instability. You scroll your phone and see more illnesses, more warnings, more stories of disaster. You might think, I'm just staying informed. But the night watch regions of the brain cannot distinguish just for information from real threat. They only see tense images, urgent voices, dangerous words, plus the small tightening in your chest. They record high risk. By the time you turn off the lights, they do not believe that things are safe. You are exhausted and want to sleep. They think, my owner has just handed me a whole list of things to worry about. How can I sleep? I must stay on watch. And so the nights begin. You jolt awake just after drifting off, lying still yet suddenly thinking about next week's test results. Half asleep yet imagining, what if I have a stroke? What if no one finds me? Feeling one skipped breath and immediately fearing a heart problem. This is not mere imagination. It is the result of a defense system lacking balanced data. It is not wrong to try to protect you. It is overdoing its job because, during the day and especially before bed, we have unintentionally supplied it only one-sided input. Starkly highlighted danger, faintly drawn safety. But like any loyal security guard, it can calm down if given proper information. The brain does not need empty reassurance without basis. It needs practical evidence that in this world, besides risks, there is also order, support, resources, coping capacity that does not come from fake optimism, but from small observations we often ignore. When you note, I went to the doctor, they scheduled a 6-month follow-up that means things are more stable than I feared. That is data. When you recognize, I have a neighbor with a spare key, my daughter calls regularly, someone visits weekly. That is data. When you remind yourself, I know how to call 911. I have survived crises worse than what I'm worrying about now. That is data. When before sleep, instead of extending the list of what if everything goes wrong, you quietly summarize the things currently keeping me safe. You are sending your alert system a different report. Some layers of protection are already in place. The brain can understand this. Modern life, especially in the US, makes older adults feel as if they are living in a sea of warnings. Insurance ads remind you of risk. news of illness, online stories of scams and loss. Some of that is necessary, but without knowing when to stop, we become like someone standing every day under a factory fire alarm. Even without flames, the body gets used to being ready to run. At night, when the sirens should go silent, invisible alarms still echo in our heads. So, the important question is not, how do I stop worrying altogether? But, what kind of data am I giving my brain to do its protective job? If all day it receives only negative data, it has no choice but to overreact. If you also provide positive but realistic data, it can balance. Before sleep, instead of letting the final images be TV arguments, overwhelming headlines, harsh self-criticism, why am I not better? Why am I such a burden? Reviewing the things that show you are not completely alone, not completely powerless. For example, you might sit quietly on your bed in soft light and think of 3 things that are protecting you right now. Health that, though imperfect, still lets you walk on your own. A home that, though simple, is a stable shelter. A relative, a friend, a trustworthy doctor, a healthy habit, a belief that gives your heart a place to rest. These 3 things do not erase all danger, but they clarify the truth that your life is not made only of naked risk. When the brain receives these images and thoughts right before sleep, it has additional factors to calculate. There are things to watch, but there are also fences in place. Interestingly, when the alert system has enough balanced data, it allows the body to shift into deeper rest. Heart rate slows, muscles release, breathing evens out. This is not mysticism. It is the effect of reducing emergency threat signals in the brain. You are not deceiving it. You are simply no longer pouring anxiety coffee into it right before bedtime. Of course, there are worries that cannot be undone with a few self-soothing sentences. Biopsy results pending, a loved one in treatment, genuinely difficult finances. These fears have real foundations, and the brain is not wrong to care. In such situations, protective data is not pretending there is no problem, but reminding yourself of the steps already taken. You have seen the doctor, sought a second opinion, spoken with family, drawn up a plan for the coming month. When before sleep you allow yourself to acknowledge both the fear and the effort, the brain receives a more accurate picture. There is risk, but also response. That helps it not keep the siren blaring all night. Between 45 and 90, you have enough experience to know that no life is free from unease, and restless sleep is not always proof that I am broken. Sometimes it is saying, I have worked too long under alarm. Please give me another kind of signal. You have every right to help your brain with very small but deeply respectful choices. Turning off the TV a bit earlier, not reading inflammatory news in bed, avoiding frightening images right before sleep, creating a quiet, dark corner so your body understands. Here, now, is temporarily safe. And perhaps the deeper lesson hidden here is this. Nighttime unease is not evidence of weakness, but evidence that your brain is still fiercely loyal to its duty to protect. The question for us is not, how do I silence it? But how do I cooperate with it better? If we constantly feed it extreme data, it must cry out. If we patiently, night after night, provide it with proof that we do know how to care, how to ask for help, how to notice light amid darkness, it will trust us more and need less to stay awake in our place. Tonight, before sleep, As you place your hand on your chest and feel your heartbeat, you might quietly ask, of all the things I thought, read, and watched today, how many made my brain believe the world is nothing but danger? And can I add one or two small things to remind it? There are still safe places, people I can trust, things I have managed to do. No long answer is needed. Just let that question sink in with your breath. The rest, allow the brain that has spent so many years bracing for you to have a chance tonight to be a watchman who is alert, but not utterly alone. When we see clearly that the vigilant brain is not trying to torment us, but only working with what we give it each day, the next question becomes very direct. All this time, what images have we been replaying for it over and over? And tonight, which channel do we want on air? Imagine that inside your mind there is a private screen, not hanging on the living room wall, not plugged into an outlet, but more faithful than any TV, phone, or computer. That screen does not play random programs. It replays what you have looked at, focused on, allowed to occupy your time and emotions, many times in a day, many days in a week, many years in a life. The brain has one very simple yet powerful rule. What repeats is important. Each time you look, think, ruminate, scrutinize a given image, you cast another ballot. Please remember this well. When your eyes close, the inner screen simply follows the election results. It plays back the images with the most votes. At 45, 60, or 85. If you look back, you will see there were phases of life where the inner screen almost had only one channel. The work channel reports, numbers, emails, your boss's face. The child-rearing channel, school schedules, appointments, tuition, meals, homework. The caregiving channel, white hospital rooms, needles, prescriptions, machines. These channels were once necessary. The problem is that even when circumstances change, the brain remains loyal to old habits. It does not yet realize that now you need different channels. Self-care, connection, peace. If each day you still let yourself be flooded with televised arguments, stressful stock charts, negative comments, faces that unsettle you, then the inner screen will conclude, this is the program my owner favors. Let's replay it. Scientifically, this is how the brain strengthens neural pathways. Connections that are activated repeatedly grow stronger, like a path made clearer with each step. Hebb, a neuroscientist, described the principle. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Each time you focus on the same type of image, the same story, the same resentment, you are training that channel. At night, when conscious control loosens, the strongest pathways automatically guide the flow. You no longer want to think, yet your mind still runs the same sequence. You can see this in very ordinary examples. If you spend all day buried in emails, spreadsheets, notifications, tiny boxes on a screen, then when you close your eyes at night, you still seem to see lines of text and cells. If you spend days following a frightening piece of news, those images return at night, even after the TV is off. If you spend too much time staring at others' perfect moments online, your inner screen easily replays scenes of comparison, breathlessness, inadequacy. If you constantly replay an argument or an injustice, that image becomes priority content, looping until you are exhausted, yet unable to switch it off. But you have also experienced the positive side of this principle. Even if you didn't name it, there were times you devoted yourself to gardening. At night you still saw green, still pictured the rows of plants. Times you read often, gentle lines returned in your mind like a storyteller's voice. Times you spent hours talking with family, reminiscing. At night, your heart felt warm as the inner screen replayed shared meals, trips, moments. In those times, you unconsciously cast votes for channels that made you feel rooted and meaningful. The quiet question here, for you alone not to blame but to illuminate, is, at this stage of my life, which channel of images am I secretly funding? The channel of I am always lacking, late, behind. The channel of the world is only chaos and threat. The channel of I am just a burden. Or the channel of I have lived, loved, and overcome so much. These channels are not slogans. They are decided by the images you allow to repeat during the day, and especially before you close your eyes. In middle and older age, you have an advantage many younger people do not. You have enough evidence to build a very beautiful channel if you choose. You have faced crises and survived. You have feared you would not endure, and yet you did. You have witnessed others' kindness at moments you thought no one would be there. You have cared for someone until the end. You have corrected mistakes, learned anew. Each of these memories is a frame worthy of replay. But if all day you look only at what makes you anxious and never put those memories on air, the inner screen will assume they are unimportant. So, what can we do? Very small, very simple to help that screen begin to favor what lets us sleep better and live more deeply. No elaborate rituals needed. Only a bit of awareness about view counts. Whenever you notice yourself alone, replaying scenes that make you angry, ashamed, or hurt, you can gently pause and ask, do I really want to give this channel one more view? You don't have to forbid it, just stop adding votes automatically. Then you can deliberately place a few worthy images into your day. Look a little longer into the eyes of the person greeting you at the store. Notice the trees outside your home changing with the season. Hold on to the moment your grandchild hugged you, then ran off. Acknowledge that your body can still walk a few more steps, still do a few things on its own. Put a photo that warms your heart somewhere easy to see by the table, by the bed, so each time you pass, you unconsciously cast another vote for the family. Gratitude, a life that has meaning beyond its flaws channel. Especially in the 10-15 minutes before sleep. Check which channel is on. If it is arguments, bad news, endless scrolling, try for one night to switch. To silence, to a few gentle lines of reading, to recalling 3 kind moments from the day. You do not need to force out all negative things. Just make sure that among them are other frames bright enough, real enough, so the inner screen is not all one color. Many will ask, but my life has so many problems. How can I avoid seeing them? You don't have to avoid them. Just don't magnify them into the whole screen. Face the issues at appropriate times during the day. Seek concrete solutions. Consult doctors. Talk with family. Write down plans. That is when the brain needs clear data to protect you. But when night falls, the goal is not strategic planning. It is recovery. If you let the same stressful images dominate that hour, you are forcing your defense system to run all night. And in the morning, you wake exhausted and assume it is just age. Part of it is that you have used the wrong programming slot. Notice that what you watch and replay affects not only sleep, but quietly shapes your temperament. Someone whose inner screen each night replays anger and injustice will, over time, believe life is mostly unfair. Someone who always lets self-blame run on repeat will struggle to see their real worth. By contrast, someone who allows themselves to remember kind moments, shared resilience, small, beautiful scenes, gradually builds a different psychological ground. Realistic, not denying hardship, but not neglecting proof of what has been done, endured, shared. Ultimately, the deep meaning of the inner screen prioritizes repeated images, is not to frighten you. Oh no, I've watched so many bad things, but to offer a very gentle invitation. From today, each time you stare at something, consider it a vote that it may return tonight and in nights to come. If it does not deserve to be replayed in your sleep and in your way of seeing life, perhaps give it fewer views. If there are images more deserving the faces of those you love, moments you were brave, kindness you received, the ordinary beauty outside your window, then you can intentionally give them more time. Tonight, when you turn off the light, close your eyes and feel the inner screen slowly glow. You may softly ask, which channel am I funding? And if you want the coming years to be less noisy, less heavy, and deeper instead of just darker, perhaps it is time to switch to another channel, one kinder to your own heart. When we realize that the inner screen always favors repeated images, another thing becomes easier to understand. Some old memories we thought we had put away somehow keep returning when we are at our most vulnerable. Does that mean the brain is failing? Or is it quietly working to help us? Let yourself lie still for a moment, without rushing to answer. Picture yourself in your familiar room. Lights off, only the faint outlines of the wardrobe. Window frame, the chair where you read the paper by day. Your body has slowed, but the mind still holds a few floating worries. And then, without warning, a scene from years ago steps out of the dark. A goodbye in a parking lot. Someone turning their back without explanation. A time you were misunderstood at work, standing there swallowing what you wanted to say. A hospital corridor smelling of disinfectant as the doctor called your loved one's name. A room where you received your diagnosis. A phone call that ended a relationship. These images do not appear randomly to torture you. They are files that, for years, you did not have enough time, strength, or emotional safety to open and review all the way through. So the brain does the only thing it knows. It brings them out at night, bit by bit, hoping to sort them. Scientifically, sleep, especially REM sleep, and the transitions between wakefulness and sleep, is the time when the brain processes emotional data, regions responsible for emotion, memory, and meaning. The amygdala, hippocampus, prefrontal areas do not shut down completely. They converse, trying to answer leftover questions. Does this still threaten me? What does the end of this relationship mean? Where do I file that unfairness in how I see myself? Is this loss the whole story, or just a very painful chapter? When old memories surface, it is not necessarily disorder, it is the sorting system running. The problem is, if every time they return, we react only with fear, rejection, self-criticism. Why can't I let go? Why am I so weak? Then the brain receives the signal. This file is still urgent, still dangerous, so it keeps it in the priority drawer and brings it out again next night, next month, next year. You may recall dreams where you are back at school, standing in an exam without having studied. Dreams where you return to your childhood home, where things were left unsaid. Dreams of your loved one lying in a hospital bed under harsh white light. You standing outside helpless. Dreams of a face turning away coldly, though in real life it was long ago. These dreams often carry a sense of unfinished. Not having explained, defended, apologized, said goodbye properly. They are signs of emotions not fully processed. Like boxes shoved into storage when guests came, left there. Sleep is when the storage is opened, dust rises, and the brain asks, "What shall we do with these?" If you are over 45, your storage likely holds more than a few boxes. It holds whole shelves. Years of work, efforts nobody saw, times you stayed silent to keep the peace, sleepless nights for children, money, illness, decisions right, wrong, lucky, regretted, words you longed to hear but didn't, words you said and wish you had not. During many periods, you simply could not sit with each one. You had to keep going. The brain understood, so it stuck a later label on many files. Later does not mean erased. It means one day, when you slow down, when there is space, these will be brought out. Often that one day is later in life. When you are older, less busy, the house quieter, others go to bed earlier, night becomes the time when old stories knock. This unsettles many. Why now? Why does it still hurt? But from the brain's point of view, there is a gentle logic. When you were young, it prioritized helping you survive, work, raise children, meet each day. When you are older, it recognizes a rare chance if you're willing to reorganize the meaning of your life. It brings out the files not to condemn you, but to ask, where can we place this so the rest of your life can be lighter? Here is where you can choose to cooperate and turn down the volume of those screams in dreams. Each time an old memory appears before sleep or slips into a dream, instead of only trying to banish it, you might look at it differently. Instead of again, how weak I am, try, my brain is putting an old file on the table. Observe it like a photograph. That is me at that time, with the knowledge, age, and endurance I had then. That is the other person back then, with their limits. That is the circumstance back then, with what no one could control. You don't have to excuse or judge immediately. Just acknowledge, I see that this is still here. When we do not judge, the nervous system receives a safer signal. This memory can be touched without sounding the fire alarm. Studies on memory processing show that when a painful memory is revisited in a state of safety, not overwhelmed by panic, the brain has the chance to update it, linking it with new evidence that you lived on, that you are no longer there, that you have changed, reducing the intensity of emotion attached. As if, on the file stamped urgent, you add a pencil note, reviewed, understood better. No longer as threatening. You can do this gently before sleep, not excavating your whole life, just a little each time. When an old image appears, the hospital hallway, the face that left, the moment you were wronged, try replacing the reflex. Go away with a quiet line. Yes, that happened. It hurt me. But I am here now, in this room, in this bed. I have lived longer than that moment thought I would. If it is your own mistake, you might whisper, I wish I had done differently, but that was me then. Since then, I have learned, lived otherwise. If it is someone else's harm, you might say, that was not the truth about me. I have carried it too long. I allow this memory to step a little further from my bedside. Then gently return your attention to the present, the feel of the blanket, the warmth of the room, the sound of the fan, your own breathing. You have just told your brain, the file has been touched. No need for red alert. The deeper meaning of the brain clearing storage at night is this. It wants you to move forward, lighter, not heavier. But if every time it opens the archive you slam the door and shout at it to be quiet, it has no choice but to bang louder in dreams, in sudden awakenings, in nameless anxiety. If instead, with the experience of someone who has walked far, you sit beside it a bit and say, "All right, show me, but let's look in silence." Perhaps both of you will work better, and perhaps, when you accept that old memories rising to the surface are not a sign that you are weak, but an invitation to tidy the attic of your soul, you will blame yourself less. Instead of asking, "Why do I still remember?" you might ask, "What do I want to learn from this memory for the rest of my life?" When the question changes, your sleep also has a chance to change, because, in the end, if your brain has spent the whole night helping you clean out the storage, then perhaps the fairest thing you can do for it, and for yourself, is not to throw in more self-hatred, but to replace it with a bit of kindness for the one who has walked with you all this way, yourself. When you understand that unresolved memories are not enemies, but files waiting to be reorganized, you begin to see the night not only as a shelter for fear, but also as the place where you speak most honestly with yourself. And there, a deeper question appears. Have I lived in line with what I believe? During the day, we are busy with work, with caring for others, with answering emails, replying to messages, fulfilling the expectations that society places on our shoulders. At 45, 60, or 80, many people become very good at answering others, but leave very little room for one fundamental question. Who am I, truly? What have I used these years to live for? By day, that question is drowned out by traffic, notifications, appointments, to-do lists. But at night, when the lights go off, when there is no audience and no role to play, the brain, especially the regions related to self-awareness and morality, quietly begins a serious task: comparison. This comparison is not about measuring yourself against your neighbors or your bank account against people online. It is a comparison between the values you once believed in and the choices you actually made, between what you tell your children and grandchildren family matters most, kindness matters most, health matters most, and the way you have lived for years. Often skipping meals, skipping sleep, skipping joy, skipping your loved ones to chase things that, in hindsight, turned out not to matter so much. Our brain does not read the philosophies hanging on the wall. It reads data, whom we spent our time on, where we put our energy, how often we said busy to what truly mattered, and free to what was only noise. When you close your eyes, in the quiet, the neural networks that build your personal narrative, the story you tell about yourself, and the prefrontal cortex that evaluates, weighs, and judges, start reconnecting. They ask questions we rarely speak aloud. I call myself someone who values family, but this past year, have I initiated a hug with anyone? I say I believe in honesty, but that time I stayed silent when I needed to speak up. I tell my grandchildren to love their bodies, but how have I treated my own body? I always say I value kindness, but lately have I been more easily irritable with my loved ones than with strangers? These questions do not appear as a formal questionnaire. They appear as a gnawing feeling, as a flashed image. The dinner your child invited you to that you refused because your eyes were glued to a screen. The sad look in your partner's eyes when you brushed off the story they wanted to share. The doctor's instructions repeated many times that you ignored, the advice you give others but have not applied to yourself. That feeling of being examined can be uncomfortable. It easily turns into self-reproach. I was wrong, I lived badly, now it's too late. But if we see it in the light of science and compassion, well, recognize this is not a makeshift court. This is the brain's normal internal audit system. It does not come to condemn, but to help you adjust your course so that the rest of your life is less out of line with what you find meaningful. The gap between values and behavior, what people call cognitive dissonance if prolonged and unacknowledged, becomes a source of quiet tension, making us restless without knowing why. Night is when that dissonance is clearest, because the outer noise is gone and only the inner voice remains. The beautiful thing is, the brain does not need us to fix our whole life in one night. It only needs us not to mute it completely. Instead of running away from painful images by opening yet another video, scrolling more news, drinking another glass of alcohol, we can try sitting with one very small, very specific question. Tonight, what is one choice I can make tomorrow that will bring me a little closer to what I truly believe? For example, if the recurring image is your child's face, asking you to go for a walk and you pushing them away because you were busy, then perhaps your belief that family is important is clashing with the reality that in not giving them time. Instead of using the night to call yourself a bad person, you can gently decide, tomorrow I will call back or send my grandchild a message first, just to check in. A small action, but it reconnects what you believe with what you do. If the image that arises is the doctor advising light exercise that you ignored, you do not need to drown in guilt. You might simply promise yourself, tomorrow I will walk a few extra minutes around the block, not to prove anything, but to honor what I keep telling others about health. When you do one small thing aligned with what you believe, your nervous system notes, update made. The next night, when it reviews again, the gap has narrowed a little. The feeling in your chest softens a little. If, during the night, your brain brings up a call you didn't return, an apology unsaid, a relationship left hanging, you don't have to rush to fix it right then, but you can acknowledge, this unsettles me, so it must touch a value of mine, maybe fairness, respect, or gratitude. Then choose one small step. Jot down a note for tomorrow, whom you will reach out to, so the thought doesn't just slip away. The brain does not need a perfect solution. It needs to see that you are not turning your back on what you claim is right. Biologically, every time you adjust your behavior closer to your values, you are rebuilding connections between decision-making regions and emotional regions in a more harmonious way. The brain likes coherence. When you live closer to what you believe, it has less need to generate uncomfortable signals to remind you. Sleep then has more chance to be peaceful, because the audit system does not have to flash such loud red lights. Between 45 and 90, this comparison gains another depth, the sense of legacy. Not only how have I lived for myself, but what am I leaving behind in the eyes of my children and grandchildren, in the memories of those who crossed my path. Many people lie awake with questions. Was I too harsh? Have I ever been unfair to my child? Did I give enough time to my partner? Did I live according to what I taught? These questions can hurt, but they are also a gift, if we know how to use them, because there is still time, whether years, months, or days to do one small thing differently. Instead of drowning in regret, you can let these questions become a very practical compass. If you have always believed in kindness, but remember having spoken harshly to loved ones, perhaps starting tomorrow you choose to speak more slowly, apologize when you slip, or express your love instead of keeping it in your head. If you believe in responsibility, but realize you also need to release some control, perhaps you practice trusting your children and grandchildren more, not letting worry turn into judgment. If you believe in the value of health, but have often ignored your body, perhaps you begin by going to bed 15 minutes earlier. Night reminds, day responds. Gradually, the gap between what I believe and what I do shrinks. Closing your eyes, then, is not only shutting out the outside world, it is opening the most honest conversation with yourself if you allow it. And you don't need to fear that conversation. It does not come to drag you down, but to invite you to live the rest of your life with more alignment and less regret. You cannot go back 20 years to change every decision, but you can change how you walk tomorrow, next week. Each night, the brain is only asking, is there something to adjust? Just a bit. If we pretend not to hear, it has to speak through anxiety and biting images. If we listen and choose one small step, it can rest more easily. Tonight, before sleep, if an image that stirs your conscience appears, a word you said, a hug you withheld, a thank you left unsent, you don't need to push it away, and you don't need to drown in guilt. Let it stand there for a moment, then gently ask, tomorrow, what is one small thing I can do to be closer to the person I wish I had been? Not to correct an entire life, just one line, one call, one note, one apology, one shared meal, one checkup, one thank you. Then allow yourself to end the day with the feeling, I have heard, and I will do one small thing. With that message, the brain has a reason to soften, because it knows its comparisons are not being ignored. And perhaps that is the greatest gift the later years can offer. Not perfection, but sincerity. Not a spotless record, but an attitude willing to see what is off and gently correct the path at the end. If closing your eyes is the moment your brain compares your life to what you've believed, then in that same moment, each of us has a very small but very real chance to answer with action. From tomorrow, I choose to live a little closer to what I have always said matters. And then each night is no longer a courtroom, but a clear mirror where we see ourselves with both honesty and kindness. When each evening becomes a quiet comparison between what we believe and what we actually do, there is another subtler thing the brain never overlooks. How we treat our own body, and without fanfare, it asks, to you, is this body a burden or a companion? Look at a very ordinary, modern evening. It's late, your eyes burn, your back is tight, but your hand still clutches the phone. Blue light hits your eyes, lines of text, clips, news. Arguments stretch on for another hour, then another. Your body sends tiny signals. A yawn, a slight ache in the neck, a scratchiness behind the eyes, heaviness in the shoulders. But your mind whispers, a bit more, it's fine. A late dinner, high in sugar, salt, stimulants. Because you were busy all day and now you compensate. A late coffee, another drink, another episode. By the time you get to bed, your stomach is still working, your heart still racing faster, your brain still processing the light and information just taken in. The body is wishing, let me rest, but your behavior sends the opposite message. You're not that important, endure a bit more. The brain, tasked with observing and learning from repeated patterns, does not only notice the food, the lights, the hour of sleep, it sees the message behind them, what your priorities are, and where this body stands in that ranking. Biologically, the brain is not separate from the body. It lives within it. Each time you stay up too late under bright light, the brain's circadian centers receive the signal. It's still daytime. Melatonin is blocked. Your internal clock is thrown off. Each time you eat very late, your digestive system has to work when the whole body should be slowing down. Blood sugar swings. The liver and pancreas take on more load. Each time you let sleep deprivation drag on, metabolic waste in the brain is not cleared enough. Areas for memory, emotion, decision-making are all affected. The brain records these not only as lines of biological data, it translates them into a deeper internal perception. It seems my owner doesn't think I deserve rest. It seems I must always endure, always push more, always stand at the end of the line after everything else. This seeps into self-worth in a very subtle way. You may tell your grandchildren, your doctor, yourself, I know health is important. I know I should sleep enough. But if each night you are the one pushing yourself past the line of exhaustion, brushing off your body's voice, the brain does not just hear the words. It watches the behavior and concludes. Between words and choices, choices are the truth. The more nights like that, the more likely a dim background feeling forms. I am not worthy of care, not worthy of rest. I must endure a little more. No one has to say that to you. Your body and brain have heard it enough through how you live. At 45, 60, 80, your body is no longer as resilient as before, which makes the message you send it all the more important. If in youth its job was to run, carry, pull, push through, then in later years it deserves a new role. To be cherished more, to sleep more fully, to eat more gently, to move more slowly. If you still treat it like a machine to be driven to the limit, the brain continues to understand. To live is to ignore my own needs. This understanding not only wears down your strength, but also erodes self-respect, because respect is not just saying, I value myself, but asking, tonight, did I turn off the light on time? Did I allow myself to rest after a long day? The good news is, the brain notices every small thing. It doesn't demand elaborate rituals, luxurious spas, or slogans. It just needs to see a few different decisions, repeated long enough. Imagine another evening, still you, in the same home. When the time comes, you decide to put your phone down 10 or 15 minutes earlier. You turn off the TV when the news is enough, without adding more images that make your heart race. You choose a lighter meal earlier, instead of eating heavily right before bed. You drink a sip of water, maybe warm, and listen to your own breathing. You dim the lights, letting the brightness soften, giving the brain the signal, it's time to rest. You place your hand on your chest and feel your heartbeat. Nothing grand, but to your brain, these are new images. My owner is stopping. My owner is not forcing. My owner is allowing. In that moment, circadian regions receive low light and begin to release melatonin more steadily. Your heart rate has a chance to slow. The sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight system, yields to the parasympathetic, the rest and restore system. In scientific terms, the body shifts from survival mode to healing mode. In the language of the heart, it is the moment, body and brain hear a different message. You deserve to rest. I see that you are tired. You are not just a tool for one more task. Each seemingly tiny choice like that, if repeated, begins to rewrite how you see yourself. Someone who allows themselves timely rest is not weak, but someone who acknowledges that their life, their strength, their body matter as much as unanswered emails or unrefreshed news. Especially in the later half of life, this is no indulgence, it is wisdom. You know that if you keep spending your strength like you did in your 30s, the price will not just be one groggy morning, but a chain of illnesses layered on top of each other. Each night, the brain does more than process memories, emotions, dreams. It also scans the body map. Where is inflamed? Where aches? What needs repair? It coordinates hormones, immunity, cell repair, metabolic cleanup. These delicate processes work best in deep sleep. When you truly give your body a quiet window, if you cut that window short, disturb it, or fill it with light, late food, and nervous strain, you are not just sleeping less. You are interrupting your own repair shift. Over time, the brain and body learn a sad lesson. My owner won't let me fully protect them. Maybe they don't really care. That sounds heavy, but this realization is an opportunity. It means that as soon as you start caring a bit more, things are already different. Tonight, if you are hearing these words from a small apartment in New York, a house in Ohio, a coastal town in California, try seeing if you can give yourself a kinder ritual in the last 15-20 minutes of the day. Not to be perfect, but to send the brain a new letter. It might be turning off the screens and turning on a soft, warm lamp, sitting on the bed, gently rolling your shoulders and neck, thanking your legs for carrying you all these years, rubbing a little cream into your wrinkled hands. Not to fight age, but to say, you've done enough. Thank you. Setting a glass of water by your bed to remind yourself in the morning. Preparing your medications according to the doctor's instructions so you don't skip them. To an outsider, these gestures may seem trivial, but to a brain and body that have worked non-stop for you for decades, they are recognition. I see you. I no longer treat you as something that must endure endlessly. As these rituals repeat, gradually the content on the inner screen also changes. Instead of only replaying scenes of you hunched over blue light late into the night, the heaviness after a late meal, the moments you ignored your fatigue, it has new scenes. You knowing when to stop, treating your body like a loved one to care for, following medical advice, honoring your own breath. These images are not just healthy habits, they are a quiet foundation for restoring self-respect. A person who cares for their body sends the brain the message, I am valuable enough to be protected, and the brain will protect more effectively. If you are blaming yourself, I've always done the opposite. It must be too late. Notice that your brain is still learning every day, even at 70, 80. Its capacity to adapt does not vanish with grey hair. It still reads new signals. If tonight you change, and tomorrow night you change, and next week you remember a few more times, slowly the dialogue between you and your body shifts. Fewer commands, more listening, less self-punishment, more respect, and sleep, accordingly, becomes more genuine. Not just collapsing from exhaustion, but a shared agreement of body and brain to rest. Ultimately, this is not only about sleeping earlier or eating later. It touches a deeper question. What do I believe about myself? If each night you send your brain the message that work, screens, and worries are always more important than your health. You are teaching yourself that you are only a means to an end. If each night you allow yourself to pause for care, you are teaching yourself that you are also a worthy destination. This is not selfish. It is the condition that allows you to keep being present for those you love. With a more durable body, a clearer mind, a heart less weighed down. So tonight, before drifting into sleep, you can ask yourself a very small question. If my brain still sees how I treat my body, what scene do I want it to record tonight? The scene of someone pushing to the point of collapse, or of someone mature enough to say, "That's enough, let's rest." The answer does not lie in words, but in what you choose to do in the next few minutes. From those small, nightly choices, a different story of self-worth is written lighter, kinder, truer to the person you have tried to become your whole life. So now, after all these nights of the brain quietly selecting, cleaning, comparing, protecting, we see, we are not powerless before our inner world. Each evening, we still have a small, private space to whisper to the brain, "Here, this is what I want to carry into my sleep." And that small space begins with one final scene. Let yourself slow down. It is late. The home you are in, perhaps an apartment high above the street lights, a small house with a white fence, a quiet bedroom in the suburbs, is now calm. The TV is silent. Traffic has thinned. Whoever else lives with you is likely asleep or curled in their own inner world. Only you remain. With your pillow, your blanket, and a whole day that has just passed. In that moment that seems like nothing, your brain is waiting for a very specific signal. With what image shall we close today? Scientifically, the brain is very sensitive to the position effect. What happens at the beginning and end of an experience tends to imprint more deeply. The ending is especially important. Before sleep, the brain enters a phase of preparing to consolidate memories, reorganize emotions, decide what will be kept longer. The images, thoughts, and feelings you touch in those last minutes are more likely to be enlarged in the night, linked with older networks, woven into the story you wake up with. This means that even if the day was chaotic, you still have the right to choose a kinder closing point for yourself. Not to deny the hard parts, but to avoid letting your most exhausted moment define the entire story of your day. Imagine you are the editor of a film titled My Day Today. All day, countless scenes intrude. News, traffic, appointments, bills, messages, calls, laughter, fatigue, small successes, unfinished tasks. You cannot control them all, but the ending, the last scene before the screen goes dark, is something you can touch. If left on autopilot, that last scene is often scrolling your phone until your eyes sting. A grumpy remark, a half-read negative headline, a comparison with someone online, a feeling of not enough, not done. When that happens, the brain simply follows its rule. It magnifies that last scene, coloring the night with incompleteness, so that in the morning your mood seems steeped in that aftertaste. But suppose, just suppose, tonight you choose a different scene. Nothing grand, just one gentle, real image. The face of someone you love, smiling. A morning long ago when the family sat around a simple warm breakfast. The feeling that you actually called your loved one today instead of putting it off. The moment you did something small but right, even if no one noticed. Straightening a chair, thanking the cashier, taking your pill on time, walking a few extra steps, swallowing a harsh word. or simply trying to be kinder to yourself. Science tells us memories tied to soft, positive emotions, not frenzy, not extreme excitement, but calm, gratitude, quiet satisfaction, are particularly helpful for psychological balance. They reduce overactivity of the alarm system, support deep sleep, stabilize long-term memory. When you choose such a moment as your final scene, you are sending your brain a signal. This is what deserves to be recalled. This is safe to enlarge. No trickery, no self-hypnosis, just prioritizing one kind piece of evidence among many sounds. You can try this right in bed. No writing, no ritual needed. Lie comfortably. Let your body find its easiest position. Drop your shoulders a little. Exhale slightly slower than usual. Then gently ask yourself, of everything that happened today, what do I choose as my last scene? At first, your brain may list every annoyance, missed appointment, sharp word, unresolved worry. That's okay. Let them pass like clips on fast forward, then slowly pause on a different frame. The person who helped you with something tiny, the moment you did not give up, an unexpectedly beautiful detail, trees outside your house, the sunset light, the smell of coffee, someone laughing in the hallway. If it truly feels impossible, you can choose something very simple. I made it through another day. At 60, 75, 85. That is not trivial. You have walked another day with your heart, lungs, legs, hands, this brain. Acknowledging that is also a worthy final frame. The image of continuity. When you hold that frame through a few breaths, the brain does its part. It links that feeling with similar memories. Other times you received kindness, did the right thing, survived a hard day. From a few bright points, it sketches a line. That line does not erase the dark stretches, but it reminds you, I am not defined only by mistakes, fear, or lack. I am also defined by small choices toward kindness, often unseen by anyone but myself. For someone living in a fast-paced place like America, this may feel challenging. You are used to next, 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 the next email, news, task. No one taught you that before sleep, you have the right to pause and choose an image just for yourself, but especially between 45 and 90, when many roles have shifted from caretaker to one who needs more care, from full-time worker to retired, from someone who must always hold on to someone beginning to let go. The final scene gains a new importance. It becomes the way you speak to your own life. I choose to remember this about today, instead of everything was just exhausting. Not every day will offer beautiful scenes. Some days are only hospitals, paperwork, bad news, arguments. Precisely on those days, the final scene is an even greater gift, not to deny reality, but to balance it. For example, on a long, tiring day, waiting for a medical appointment, you might still choose the moment the doctor explained clearly, or the empathetic look of someone waiting beside you. On a day of hard news, you might choose the hand that held yours. On a day full of mistakes, you might choose your genuine decision to change, instead of the thought I'm useless. All are truths. They differ only in what you allow yourself to rest in longer. The brain does not require a perfect ending. It only enlarges what you hand it. If each night you surrender the last scene to endless scrolling, harsh comments, shocking news, you hand the editor's role to things that do not love you. If each night you stop a few minutes early to choose one gentle, truthful image, you take some of that role back. Over time, those endings weave into a different sense of life. Less bitter, more grateful, more calm, even if reality is still demanding. And this is where self-development in later life no longer means racing, setting huge goals, forcing drastic change. It becomes the art of choosing small scenes. You do not need to rewrite your whole past. You only need to treat today better day by day by closing it in your heart with more fairness, seeing both fatigue and effort, both hardship and a point of light. That is a very subtle maturity, using your later years not to sentence yourself, but to gently adjust your story about yourself. Tonight, before sleep, you can try a very simple ritual. Lie down, close your eyes, inhale slowly, exhale longer, then quietly ask yourself, as if asking a close friend, in today's film, what final scene do I want to keep? There is no right or wrong answer, only your choice. A smile, a finished task, something unfinished that you still faced, someone you miss and silently wish well. Hold it in your mind for a few breaths, then let yourself drift into sleep from that image. Maybe tomorrow external circumstances won't change, but if you keep choosing like this for a few weeks, a few months, you'll notice something very quiet. Nights that feel less heavy, mornings that feel less like climbing out of a pit, an inner voice that is less harsh, more gentle, not because the world suddenly improved, but because you have quietly retrained your brain and your heart to see yourself with more fairness and compassion. One night, in a very still moment, you might realize, it turns out all this time I haven't just been learning to sleep better. I've been learning to live more kindly with myself, because the final scene before sleep, if chosen with care, is not just a blessing for the night, it is a message for the rest of your life. I no longer want to walk on with the story I am always lacking. I am always wrong. I want to walk with the story. I am someone who has tried, has loved, has stumbled, has stood up, and each night I allow myself to acknowledge at least one small, beautiful piece of that journey. So, before you close your eyes tonight, when the room is dark enough, when the world has stepped back outside the door, give yourself a private moment to answer a small but deep question. If you know you have the right to choose the final scene in your inner film, what frame do you want your brain to project tonight? You can close your eyes now, letting your thoughts fade like mist. If your mind still wants to wander, let it continue its journey to the next video, where we will go deeper into the mysteries of the soul. And if your body is already tired, then just let this sound lull you into sleep. No need to try, just breathe. And remember, everything you are searching for is already resting quietly inside yourself.